Chris today? He's not
Not
with us.
sure the recording has started.
Okay, well, welcome everyone for chapter 16 of Romans. This is March 17th, St. Patrick's Day.
Yep.
And just to answer Ren's pre-taped question, you'll see the commentators kind of drop in and out over the next couple of months. Chris had some, and that's why we picked the dates that we did.
Okay.
And we won't see Barbara again for another couple of weeks, and then she's with us for quite a while.
Okay.
So we'll start with a prayer associated with St. Patrick. May the strength of God pilot us, may the power of God preserve us, and may the wisdom of God instruct us. So even though chapter 16 is quite short, and one of the shortest in Romans, it's often broken up into 5 distinct parts, and we'll kind of tackle it that way. The first is an introduction to Phoebe, who brings the letter to the house churches of Rome from Paul. And we talked about Phoebe a couple of weeks ago. I think we had an image of her. Who knows how realistic it was. It was done centuries after her death. The second part is a greeting to the leaders in the Roman churches. The third is a summary of some theological points from previous chapters in Romans. The fourth is a greeting from the leaders of the Christian community in Corinth and elsewhere. And then finally, there's a farewell and a statement about the foreshadowing of Christ in Torah. So let's take that first part. So Phoebe, as we've talked about earlier, wore many hats. She was a courier. She was an avatar. In other words, she stood in for Paul and performed the message of Roman to these churches multiple times for the multiple churches. She was referred to Paul as a sister. Of course, not a biological sister, but a member of the family of Christ. She was a benefactor in the church in Centre, which is about 40 miles from Corinth. It's actually on the Saronic Gulf, kind of south of Athens, but a major shipping point. And she was a deacon or deaconess in the church. One of the first mentioned deacons in the New Testament, and of course, most of our ecclesiastical hierarchy is never mentioned in the Testaments, but deacons are. We don't have bishops. We really don't have priests as such, but deacons are mentioned early, and Phoebe was one of the earliest. So why make such a big deal about Phoebe? Well, her bona fide were really important in making the message heard that Paul wanted to bring to the churches in Rome. He had never visited Rome. He knew some of the individuals either by reputation or from having met them in the diaspora. But it was important that his message be appropriately received. And that's why Phoebe is given such a long list of her qualifications. Of course, we're reading Romans backwards. This is the very last chapter. You would think this would be in the first chapter. Yeah. And maybe Ted has some comments about that, about maybe this has been transposed from an earlier part. Anyway, so it's important that the churches in Rome see Phoebe as a valid and a fit spokesperson for the message that Paul wants to impart. The second section are the greetings too, and this is quite long. And these are the 2 prominent members of the Christian churches in Rome. And here again, it's important to establish bona fide. Paul wants the churches in Rome to know that he knows about them. Well, how did he learn about them? In Acts, we read about Priscilla and Apollo. They were part of the diaspora out of Rome under the reign of Claudius. And so Paul has studied up on who's who in the Roman churches. And so he makes a big pitch to these individuals. And because, again, obviously, the success of his message is partly going to be due to how well he and his emissaries are received. The list tilts strongly towards women. In fact, we'll notice that when Priscilla and Apollo are mentioned, Priscilla is mentioned first. So even though in other epistles from Paul, we sometimes see messages about limiting the role of women, it's pretty clear that Paul recognizes the immense work that women are doing in the Christian church in the first century, and of course continued to do for the next 2,000 years. He calls these leaders in the church his brothers and sisters, just as they referred to Phoebe as a sister. And so you get this sense of a developing feeling of members that the Christian community are a family and are all children of God and are all related to one another in a very strong sense. He refers to some of the members in the Christian churches in Rome as kinsmen, which I think we should look on as meaning fellow Jews. And as you remember a couple of weeks ago when this came up, Ren suggested that sometimes Jewish converts would take on Roman Greek or Romanized names, and I think that since we see several individuals with Greek names in this list who are referred to as kinsmen, I think that gives weight to Ren's opinion. Okay, so the third section, and it seems kind of a funny arrangement. We've got Phoebe's introduction. We've got greetings to. Why does that not follow with the greetings from? Not entirely clear, but that's as it's laid out in the version we have. So we have in the third section a summary of some of the theology that Paul has been preaching earlier in Romans. Avoid those who cause division or put obstacles in the way of the faith and the faith of the church. Be wise about what's good and innocent about what's evil. And all of these are quotes from this last section of chapter 16. The God of peace will crush Satan under your feet. I have a question mark there. It seems a little contradictory to refer to the crusher as the God of peace. Maybe we can discuss that. Well, then the fourth section is the greeting from. And this is the laundry list of the fellow workers in the vineyard with Paul. And again, what's the purpose of this? I think it's to put Paul in good company, because presumably the leaders of the church in Rome will recognize many of these names. Either some of these individuals have visited Rome or their reputations are well known among the Christian diaspora. And so we hear of Timothy and Silas and a shorter but a formidable list of the Christian evangelists throughout the Mediterranean. And then the final section I kind of call the Halen Farewell. It ends with Paul's blessing, but it starts with a suggestion that Christ's coming had long been foretold by the prophets. And of course, this is a theme that we're very familiar with, especially around Christmas time, when many, or in Advent, when many of the lessons, look at the statements of the prophets as being not for that time exclusively, but as sort of laying foundations for the emergence of Christ in the world. Okay, so there's my summary of what I call the 5 sections of Romans 16, a short but I think impactful chapter. So we can stop the recording.